this time of season, ADs, head coaches, man, they are going 100 miles an hour, maybe like you in your business. It's tax season. You've got a lot of stuff coming up as the first quarter comes to an end. You need to get organized. You need to call Emily Parks at Organized for Success. They are bringing us our next segment here on Timeout, and we're talking about coaching searches. And I know as a former AD that coaching searches can start one place and then end up at a very different one. We talked about some of those things, guys, so far here in today's show. And as you look at NC State, lots of rumors going around the Atlantic Coast Conference tournament this past week in Charlotte. Are the Wolfpack going to get this guy or that guy? My source says this. My money guy says this. I mean, what does anybody really know? Well, not that much, because the only people that are really talking right now are media people talking to each other and then quoting each other, saying that they have a source. Or one of my favorites is when the agents or the coaches themselves are out there spreading information around because they want something to happen that maybe 1, 2, 3 degrees of separation away could end up to be a positive for them personally or for their program in terms of getting somebody out of the way that they don't like to compete against. But for NC State, hey, this is going into week number 2 for Boo Corrigan, looking for the new head coach of the Wolfpack. They were rumored to have talked to Will Wade not only once, but not only one time, but a second time over the weekend. What are you guys hearing about the openings at both NC State and Virginia? And then what are some other things that could shake open if somebody were to depart the ACC and go to another job?
Well, I think you'll have some dominoes fall in unexpected places by way of coaches leaving that we don't expect to. There are so many things that are affecting coaching jobs now that are a precursor of what's to come. There's complete dynamic change in how the highest level of college basketball, when I say highest level, teams that can make the tournament in their own respective grouping. There's ways that are going to change that. Are you going to be affiliated with a conference or not? I saw one suggestion that I tend to agree with, that at the one bid leagues, there's really no benefit to be in a one bid league anymore. There's almost, to me, a way that you can make yourself independent, because the other thing that I've found out in talking to a lot of coaches nowadays, they don't know what to do with their schedule yet. They haven't figured out how to necessarily manage their schedule, largely in part because the transfer portal is changing all of the rosters that in the past, Mike and David, you would kind of have a little bit of a gauge and a handle on. And look, I was privy to be around a guy who was a master at managing schedules based on what was to come at Kansas and my dad. And when he did those schedules for Kansas, and all of a sudden Kansas was a top 2 or 3 seed, like, well, yeah, they're pretty good, but then it was their strength of schedule. That's what the committee based it on. And I say that because you were able to at least get a feel by talking to people of what was to come. Hey, we finished second or third, but we had 2, 3 kids sitting out. We got a couple red shirts. We're going to be really good next year. We're going to win the MEAC. We're going to win the MAC. We're going to win the Big West. Well, we know at Kansas and a school like that, we can beat them, especially we'll give them a little bit of money. They need that money. That game is all changed right now. In the case of coaching searches, I think you really kind of show your colors. Like, look, Miami hired a coach off a sitting staff in the middle of a season before their conference tournament, and Jay Lucas leaving Duke, albeit for a fellow conference member in Duke, to come because the priority for Miami was, we do have resources to go into the portal right now. And if Jay is the guy and puts the right staff and office together, we can win next year. So there's like, that's the priority. I think in the case of guys like Boo Corrigan, is that their priority or not? Or do they have the patience to do something for the medium term that could turn into long term? I think if you're really calculated as a coach right now, and let's just use Will Wade as an example, because for obvious reasons, if you are the guy that can coach at multiple places because of your acumen and your history and your ability, you really want to make sure you go to the place that it matches what you want to do. Like I said, you're going to have some tournament coaches, at least one tournament coach, leave his school completely unexpectedly to go to another place because he believes that it's better suited for him for whatever the term of his lifespan is to have success there. And he's leaving a tournament school because this is all going to be about what resources do we have? Number one, where is the allocation of the salary going to fall to basketball? The going rate out there amongst the coaching circles is that at the highest levels, it has to be at least close to 7 million a year. And this is crazy. We've been talking about this. So coaches will use that as a barometer. Number two, are you going to staff me with players? I'm sorry, with people a la what Rick Pitino has. Rick Pitino has a former assistant coach who made his bones as a recruiter, who is now his general manager. He lets him get in the weeds of the portal. He knows right now they have to replace 3 guys. He doesn't even care who those guys are. That's on that guy to do it with the trust and the input from Coach Pitino, and he'll just coach the team. So my point is, are you set up to where I can just go coach the team? Or do I have to really be involved in making these financial decisions? Some coaches may not want that. These are the things that are going to drive these decisions as to how quickly and how patient ADs like Boo Corrigan need to be. And you mentioned this too early on, Mike. Is this the case where we have to get somebody or we have to make sure we get someone to get it right? That's always kind of the case anyway. But I think there's no more pressure to do that in the past than there is now. The difference now is the ramifications of that could be we can win and make the tournament next year and then really set this thing up, or we can figure out, given our landscape of where we're at, how we can set this up to get the right guy in and year out, knowing we can make those yearly adjustments, because we're going to give this head coach the right guy to help manage this thing off the floor and let him go out and coach. Two totally different dynamics that haven't necessarily been a driving force in hiring before, that I think today will be a true tale of exactly where the AD and the campus and the administration's heads are at based on how fast and who they hire.
Yeah, Mike, this is going to be a fascinating coaching carousel for even more than the usual reasons. Number one, imagine if you're Villanova right now and you are talking to Ryan Odom of VCU, Richard Pitino of New Mexico, and Chris Collins of Northwestern, the former Duke player and longtime Wildcats head coach. If Chris Collins was your number one choice, you could hire him right now. Northwestern is not in the NCAA tournament. Chris Collins has clearly shown interest in the job. Northwestern, by Big Ten standards, does not give its basketball coach the same kind of resources as Coach was describing, NIL and otherwise, than much of the rest of that league. Villanova being a Big East member, football is not playing at the FBS level at Villanova. There's an attractiveness in the eyes of many coaches that a Villanova, of course, with basketball as the number one sport on campus, will give its coach more resources, both revenue sharing internally and the third-party name, image, likeness money, which again is going to continue even under the new rules. If Chris Collins was the number one guy at Villanova, they could hire him tomorrow. If they really prefer Ryan Odom of VCU or Richard Pitino of New Mexico or somebody else who's still coaching in the NCAA tournament, it can't happen now. Jay Lucas was willing to leave Duke early, and even that was unconventional because he's not the head coach, and because these coaches, most of them, have come to the consensus that if you wait all the way until your team is eliminated, it may be too late to build your roster for next year with the transfer portal officially opening again on Monday, March 24th. You could lose an entire year, is the quote that I have heard repeatedly. Same thing at NC State, right? Will Wade is coaching right now at McNeese in the NCAA tournament. He's not available for the more detailed conversations until his team is eliminated. Maybe that's in the round of 64, maybe not. Justin Gainey, if he was the number one choice, Rick Barnes at Tennessee probably would let him leave early, even though they're in the NCAA tournament, but maybe Justin Gainey is the second choice or the third choice. Richard Pitino, again, has talked to the Wolfpack, as have Justin Gainey and Will Wade, but Richard Pitino in the NCAA tournament, New Mexico head coach. How long does his team play? That impacts how quickly things can ramp up after that. And again, the 4D chess about this also includes, does Rick Barnes retire at Tennessee? So that's a prominent vacancy. Does Texas make a coaching change, even though the Longhorns barely made the NCAA tournament? That would be a prominent vacancy. And those schools could be after some of the same people that these schools are after in our neighborhood. Does Brad Brownell leave Clemson for Indiana? UVA's talked to Ryan Odom and would like to hire him, but he might go to Villanova instead. UVA is talking to Richard Pitino. Ben McCollum of Drake has his team in the NCAA tournament. Fran McCaffrey, a guy we know in this state because of his time at UNC Greensboro, is out at Iowa. Would Ben McCollum at nearby Drake be the right fit for Iowa instead of a UVA closer to our backyard? Bob Ritchie at Furman has been on the UVA list. His team's playing in the NIT. Is that different? Can you talk to an NIT coach, or is he also going to ask you to wait a little bit longer? There's a lot of moving parts in all this stuff. And to Coach Keating's point, I was always told back in the day, and this is just new variations of it, but what do coaches ask themselves? Number one, what are you going to pay me? If that's not an acceptable number, I don't even want to get to the other things on my checklist. So I do know what you're going to pay me, not just the salary number, but bonuses and all the rest, buyouts, length of contract. What's my contract? That's number one. Unless a school throws out some appealing pictures, you don't get to number 2, 3, and 4. What's 2, 3, and 4? The number 2 question I've often heard is, can I win there? Now, can I win there for a long time was, what is your budget for men's basketball compared to the other teams in your league especially? Do you have an outdated facility where you play your home games, or is it a state-of-the-art facility or something in between? What about your weight room? What about the other facilities? How new are they? Is money being raised? Can I win there takes a lot of different forms, but a new form of can I win there is, what is your NIL budget? How much of the 20.5 million that you're allowed to spend on this new House settlement NCAA lawsuit is going to be dedicated to men's basketball versus football or something else on campus? What does the picture look like for that third party NIL money, right? I've been told that the overwhelming majority of schools in the Power 5 basketball conferences are going to spend to the 20 point something million dollar cap. That's the internal revenue sharing, right? It's just 20.5 million flowing to your choice of athletes on campus, but it can be divided any number of ways. There's a handful of schools in the power leagues, including the ACC, that are not sure they'll spend all the way to the $20.5 million cap because they're just not sure they have the resources. Is NC State one of those schools? Or are there boosters at NC State stepping up and saying, we're going to make sure that the Wolfpack can spend all the way to 20 plus million, the way most of their competitors, almost all of their competitors in the ACC are going to spend? That's a lot of variables, man. It's what's my contract? Can I win there, including NIL stuff? You know, what's the culture there? You'd be surprised how often a coach's wife vetoes a certain school or a certain part of the country. That stuff does happen, not a lot, but from time to time. I also know coaches that would never, ever, ever go to school X. I won't get into the details, but for example, a black head coach who believes that a certain fan base has too many racists, and they just would not go to that school. I've heard that straight from those coaches' mouths. They would never go to schools A, B, and C because of that factor, because of things they've witnessed with their own eyes. So there's a lot of factors in play. It always starts with money and can I win there? But man, there's a lot of moving parts. And for restless fans who are wondering why this stuff takes so long, these are among the reasons why it takes so long. And just remember, as of a week from us having this conversation, there are only 16 coaches still in the NCAA tournament. And it's also the day that the portal officially opens. You want to talk about the wild, wild west, man. It is going to be crazy 1 week from today because there'll be only 16 head coaches in the NCAA tournament, handful more in some other lesser tournaments, and then a whole, literally thousands of names entered into the Division I men's basketball transfer portal. That is when you're going to see a lot of these most prominent coaching vacancies filled. Just remember that there are some that aren't officially open yet that are likely to become open and maybe be higher in the pecking order than your favorite school.
You talk about the spending to that house settlement, the revenue share cap, 20 point whatever million dollars. And you start to look at some of the choices that are going to be made by athletic directors and people who are running these campuses. And we're not talking about a coaching change at Wake Forest, despite the fact that the Demon Deacons have not made the NCAA tournament in 5 years. But if you're John Curry, you've had to replace Dave Clawson, who routinely complained about the lack of football NIL support at Wake Forest. You've replaced him now with Jake Dickert, who got a lot out of a little out in the old Pac-12. And now he's the head coach of Demon Deacon football. But again, at Wake Forest, they've not been to the NCAA tournament in 5 years. Since Skip Prosser passed away and Dino had a few good years, Wake Forest basketball has been largely irrelevant. It makes me wonder, why would anybody at Wake Forest in a position of influence advocate to spend the lion's share of that 20-some million dollars on football when the likelihood of that ever paying off is about like buying the $2 play of Powerball down at your local Circle K? Okay. Whereas if you put 10 to 12 million dollars into basketball, which they're likely to put into Demon Deacon football, Steve Forbes could go out and buy a great roster. I mean, even Cal in Fayetteville, Arkansas with the Hogs is only spending around 8 million this year. And granted, those are going to go up and up and up. But man, some of the choices that these schools have, that have both a football and a basketball program at that power level. I mean, outside of Alabama, who's the top 4 seed in a CFP, achiever? Well, Clemson this year, they made the CFP as they won the ACC football championship, and they're, one of the top 4 seeds in the tournament. But wow, I mean, you got to figure if you're Brad Brownell, don't you want to go somewhere to where you're going to have the lion's share of that money, perhaps? I think there are a lot of questions out there, and there's some great decisions that are going to be debated that these ADs make. And a lot of people don't talk about this kind of stuff, but it's fascinating that you would, at some of these schools where you're not going to contend for a CFP championship, that you're going to burn over $10 million a year just because you can. I don't know, guys. That just sticks in my craw, and I can't
Mike,
get it out of my head.
Look at it this way. You have spent most of your adult life in athletics administration. You've been a Division I athletic director. You've been an assistant AD in multiple major conferences. And really, it has never been one of your top priorities to make these sorts of decisions. For most of the past 25 years, your job was to raise money. It was to hire the right coaches, fire the wrong coaches, connect with the fan base, help facilities improve. Now you have a brand new part of your job description. Mm-hmm. And you, as the athletic director, have a football coach coming in many schools saying, I want 18 of the 20.5 million as the football coach, because we are the tail that wags the dog in terms of football TV money, which is an accurate statement. Roughly 80% of all TV money is football related. So the football coach says the opposite of what you said. It may be different at Wake Forest, and I respect that argument. But the football coach is saying, I want 18 million, and you can divvy up the 2.5 million to whoever else you see fit. What's happening is at some schools, it's a little bit closer to 15 million for football and 5 million for men's basketball, and then just a little for everybody else combined. But what's also happening is coaches are being asked. You want to talk about the changing job description of an AD like Mike Waddell. There's a changing job description for a head coach like Kerry Keating, where for his entire career, I'm sure relating to boosters was a factor. Now, relating to boosters means find some dudes with deep pockets who will supplement the money we have coming from revenue sharing. That's just that revenue sharing is name, image, likeness money coming from within the university. That's all it is. And again, you have the discretion as an athletic department with the AD having a huge decision. You are going to make mad many of your coaches with your answer to that question, period. And the ones that aren't mad are going to be disappointed, right? So if at Coach Keating's school, he is told, I mean, Santa Clara would have been different because football is a different animal there. But if he was at a football school at the time, maybe he's told by his AD that, you know what, we'll give you 4 million, but we need you to cultivate third party outside the athletic department business owner boosters to maybe raise another 3 million for you. And now you have 4 million from us internally, 3 million that it is you're no longer just a recruiter and shaking hands and kissing babies and finding the right fits for your system and hiring a good staff and recruiting. You are now essentially more directly than ever before a fundraiser. And if you don't like the 3 or 4 million I'm giving you from inside the university, you better go find your own 3 or 4 million from your bigger booster buddies. And that is happening. Brad Brownell at Clemson has developed a reputation for being the kind of guy that has gotten, obviously, football is the centerpiece at Clemson, duh. But Brad Brownell has developed a reputation as someone who has cultivated deep-pocketed people specifically willing to support Clemson basketball. That's how you keep Chase Hunter and Ian Shefflin rather than them playing for somebody else. And that's how you attract 3-year Boston College starter Jaden Zachary and multi-year Cincinnati starter Victor Larkin. They're your 4 foundational pieces. And if you didn't have the right money people, maybe none of those 4 would be playing for Clemson basketball this year. I mean, ask Boston College and Virginia Tech, who lost most of their entire lineup from last year's teams. They're now playing elsewhere over name, image, likeness issues. If you fail to support Mike Young at Virginia Tech, and now they're saying they're going to give him more money, well, duh, no coach is good enough to lose 4/5 of his starting lineup every year because other schools are paying better. No, I mean, nobody's replenishing the talent that quickly every year. You got to give him some help so that his coaching acumen matters more. It doesn't matter as much if you don't have the horses. And that these are the fascinating decisions that, the House lawsuit is brand spanking new, guys. It actually isn't even in effect yet, technically. But these decisions, we sometimes say something is being done for the first time. The $20.5 million division has never been a part in the 100-year history of college athletics. It starts this summer, and ADs and coaches are dividing on how to slice that pie, and it dramatically impacts the coaching carousel that we've been discussing today.
I just, in listening and trying to revert back to how I came up in this business, but where it's going, and we're kind of throwing around, 20 million for this and 7 million for that's a lot of money. Like, we're not talking about chump change here. Like, I got to Santa Clara in 2007, and our entire budget to run the basketball program was $300,000.
Wow.
Undaga's at the time was 1.2 million. I was more worried about that chasm than anything else. And that wasn't that long ago, not even 20 years ago. And here we are talking about any team that wants to compete in Division One, at least at $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, to pay the players, not even operate and run their team. And Mike, you know this better than anybody in terms of operating budgets and the costs involved to do this. And you're trying to do things right. I remember everyone clamoring for practice facilities and chartering flights. Like, guys, there's costs involved in that. This really does all boil down to, and look, for all the flaws and that Rick Pitino has had, he's overcome them by being a great coach. But just look at what's happened there right now. They literally have a billionaire who is openly and outwardly saying, this guy is in the locker room, Mike Rapoli, talking to the team. Like, everybody knows that's the coach, but that's the guy who's paying me. Like, that whole dynamic is just like, when you step back, like, hold on a second here. Like, it's a great time to be a college basketball player right now. It's a great time to be even a budding high school player that's going to find a path to that money before maybe one day getting to the NBA or Europe. But the amount of money they're talking about, this isn't like, hey, I need 20 million to invest in this facility. I need 20 million so that we can invest. There's no investment here. This is all year to year. This is per year. I just like sometimes like step back, like, wait a minute. We're talking about 5 million, 7 million a year. Like, this is all changing. That is an inordinate amount of money for 75% of all Division I schools right now. All it really tells me is this is eventually going to lead to the haves and the have-nots, which is what they always wanted. The haves always wanted. And the fact that this tournament is kind of still binding everybody together albeit by the shoestrings until into the 2000, I think 35, 36 season. These next 9 seasons of college basketball, it will look nothing like we're talking about right now, even 5 years, let alone even 4 years from now. But this year to year impact and how you can kind of plan out where your budget's going to be, where you're going to get this money from. Are you going to actually have, and guys, this is really what it boils down to for me. It, I think, is a 51 to 49% ratio of who your head coach is and who's managing this for the head coach. Because it's impossible right now for a coach to manage anywhere from an 18 to 28-year-old kid, because they're also kind of kids if they're in college, if you will, to try to win games while getting into the day-to-day operations to make this not be a roller coaster. Well, we had the money last year. Now we don't have it this year. We're going to get it next year. Well, we found this thing. All of a sudden, a new booster comes along. But what happens when that said booster gives up the $4 million that they got in interest payments from their war chest that they have and decide, you know what? I don't like that ROI. We didn't make the tournament. What are the agreements with the boosters or the financiers, if you will? And this is where some of these guys are going to push for private equity and venture, because they're going to take more of that approach to try to create the return and revenue share in the returns on the tournament back to those people. Not sustainable, in my opinion, not a good model as of yet. But all of these moving parts really have such a dynamic effect on the year to year. You're going to see the same teams in, the ones that can manage it, and you're going to have some of these teams that are have the foresight to really set this up. And this all goes back to the conversation that we've had all day today, guys. Who are you going to hire? What resources are you going to give? But what support are you going to give to that coach that's going to be so dialed into a business acumen to run this right year to year, so you don't go through these fluctuations that are going to drive not only your coaches crazy, yourself crazy, but your fan base and your alums crazy. There is just so many different moving parts. It's not a great time to be an AD unless you have those monies in hand. It's going to be really interesting to see how these things all get planned out and play out in the next month.
Public service announcement. Public service announcement. If you're a young person, get it in writing. We already have lawsuits, for example, against Florida State head coach Leonard Hamilton, recently retired, of players who said the coach promised them X in the form of name, image, likeness money under the old system and didn't get what they were promised. And I guarantee you Florida State is not the only school that fits that description. Get it in writing. Under the new system, what'll be good is your own university has to put it in writing. Whatever they're promising you, they have to put it in writing. That's a much safer place to go. But those third parties, that billionaire in the St. John's locker room, you better get those deals in writing so that if you're injured, you still get paid. If you underperform, you still get paid. Get it in writing, get some good legal representation, because the money, it's not unusual to see $1 million, a 7-figure college basketball player nowadays. Get it in writing. The other fun thing, I'm dying to see how this plays out. Whereas that St. John's example has become a public one. 9 out of 10 coaches that I know in their public comments will only generally speak about money. They will not get real specific because they don't want to alienate their athletic director. They don't want to alienate this booster or whatever. They got to be careful with how they word it so they speak generally. Jim Boeheim in his final days at Syracuse and Red Autry, his successor at Syracuse, have both come out and publicly said, hey, we have a lot of big boosters and they haven't been stepping up for us. I mean, Boeheim's famous for being blunt in all contexts, but he said at the end, yeah, I don't know what's going on. Remember his comments? Wake has bought a basketball team and Miami has bought a basketball team. And we have a lot of great supporters here at Syracuse basketball. But I know this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy, and they're not stepping up to get me players. That's the truth serum answer to what's going on. 99 out of 100 coaches do not speak as bluntly as end of his career already in the Hall of Fame, Jim Boeheim at Syracuse. But you're going to see behind the curtain conversations about boosters who like to talk about the money they used to throw around. But now that it's even more intimately tied to next year's basketball team, you better be a fascinating manager of billionaires and boosters, along with your staff and your recruits and their moms and dads and all the other things that have been part of it for decades.
And David, that's why the old school AD and the old school head coach don't work in this era. There's a reason why Mike Krzyzewski and all of his grandeur and Roy Williams said no mas. There's a reason why my
Tony
friend
Bennett.
Eric Hyman, the former AD at Texas A&M at the University of South Carolina, said on the record 5 years ago, 60 months ago, he said, anyone that wants to be a Division I power level director of athletics has brain damage, okay? Because what we grew up working in this business to get to that level of being in the C-suite. I started out as a broadcaster. I then became an administrator and then an AD. And then 3 different times, I led professional sports teams. And that's where I got my appreciation of where you put your money, and you need to have immediate impact from that money. It can't be a savings bond anymore. That's what it's always been in college athletics. Well, we have to give a coach 3 years, or there has to be 5 years that we have to give old Ted so he can get everything rolling on the sidelines. Well, that doesn't work anymore. You can do it right now. Who proved that? Andy Enfield at SMU, Pat Kelsey at Louisville. You don't have to wait anymore. But it's crazy the amount of money that's being talked about. But if you don't spend that money wisely, if you just hire this position and say, hey, we hired a GM, we're going to be great. But all the other parts of your organization were set up poorly to begin with under in terms of a mindset. Boy, I tell you, you're just begging for trouble. And that's where I tell you, this is a big topic, and we're going to talk about it more, not only here in the month of March, but all throughout the offseason into April and May and June and July when the ACC football kickoff comes back here to the Queen City in Charlotte, because this is going to be an ever-evolving topic. And some of the decisions that come out of this coaching cycle, of these games being played behind the scenes with big money donors and these administrators, and we're the presidents and all this, nowhere. I mean, it is a colossal mess.
This is the moment we waited for. Everything you want is right here. We gon' give them what they came for. We gon' take it up from last